Hi everyone, I hope you're all well today. I've been contacted by lots of people who are worried and feeling anxious about how they're going to cope with Christmas and New Year sober, how they're going to get through all of those demands, all of those pressures, the after-works drinks, the family gatherings, the parties, the office parties, the family meals, the invitations out to go out drinking with groups of friends. Even something as simple as walking around a Christmas market and being faced everywhere you look by mulled wine or cosy looking, attractive, inviting bars. I'm going to tell you all about how I coped and got through my first Christmas and New Year sober. And I'm also going to share with you the 3 Ps. The 3 Ps that will allow you to navigate your way through Christmas and New Year more effortlessly and more easily sober than you might have imagined possible. So my first Christmas sober was hard work. It was hard work because I can't even remember exactly when I'd stopped drinking. I think it was in the October or the November. It was autumnal. I remember it being autumn. So I hadn't been sober for that long. And my previous routines over Christmas and New Year had obviously been centred around drinking and getting completely wasted. So I had to do battle with all of those ingrained and embedded programs and routines. And so what I did is I protected myself. And I protected myself and my sobriety by saying no. I said no to just about everything. I said no to friends who were inviting me to go out for drinks with them. I said no to parties I was invited to. I said no to old colleagues of mine who were inviting me out for Christmas meals. I said no to my other half and his mates who were going up to the local pub and wanted me to join them. I said no to stacks of different invitations and events because I needed to protect myself. There were 3 things that I said yes to because I'd pre-planned in my mind what I thought I could cope with. And I'd rehearsed saying no to all of these invitations so that when I was actually asked and invited along to things, it kind of tripped easily off my tongue to say no because I'd rehearsed it. But the 3 things I said yes to were my Christmas Day meal at my parents' house with all of my family. I said yes to my boyfriend's work party because that was really important to him. And so I said yes to that. What was the other thing I said yes to? There was another thing. Oh, I said yes to a meal out with some old colleagues of mine that I'd known in a professional capacity. And I said yes to an evening out with them. Now, the thing is, it's really important to protect yourself. So I protected myself over Christmas and New Year by just saying no to virtually everything. But then the things that you decide you can cope with, the things that you decide you're going to manage, it's really important to plan for those things and to prepare for those events. So with those 3 events, the Christmas Day at my parents', the meal out with my ex-colleagues and my boyfriend's Christmas party, I had to really prepare for those events. I had to plan. I had to plan what I was going to be drinking at those events. I had to plan how long I was going to stay. I had to plan and prepare my excuses, what I was going to say to people if anybody kind of offered me a drink or anybody asked me why I wasn't drinking. I had to prepare and rehearse everything that I was going to say in advance of actually going. The wise thing to do is to prepare all of this and plan all of this in advance. Don't wait till you actually get to the event because it's going to be much harder to cope with things on the spot. The best way to go into these things and to safeguard yourself, to protect yourself, is to go prepared. So I rehearsed. I rehearsed when I think the first of these 3 different events was probably the meal out with my ex-colleagues. And so before I went for this meal out, I actually mentally rehearsed what the evening was going to be like, what I was going to order when I got to the bar. And I actually imagined a couple of my colleagues who I knew would be there early, and I knew the one that was going to arrive late. So I imagined my two colleagues standing at the bar. I imagined them with one of them would be drinking a G&T, one of them would have a small glass of wine. And I pictured it all really vividly in my imagination. And then I imagined myself greeting them, saying hello, doing the hugs and the kisses. And I imagined ordering myself a tonic water with ice and lemon at the bar. That was my drink of choice. That was what I'd planned to drink instead of my usual G&T. So I just had a tonic water in my mind as I was mentally rehearsing this. Mentally rehearsed all of this, imagined how the evening was going to play out, imagined myself sitting at the table and didn't know what food I was going to order. You don't go into that much detail. But you just plan, prepare and mentally rehearse what you're going to drink instead, how you're going to be, how you're going to react if someone asks you what you want to drink, or how you're going to react if they ask you why you're not drinking. So I had my excuse already planned and pre-prepared and rehearsed, and I'd practiced saying it out loud, and it was easy. I was driving. And I had a stack of stuff to do the next day. I had to be up at the crack of dawn, and I just basically said, oh no, I'm driving tonight and I'd rather, because some people will say to you, oh, one won't hurt. But it's important to go prepared with a response to all of the possible challenges that you can imagine you might have. So I went along ready to say to people, oh no, thanks, I'm driving. And I've got a stack of stuff to do tomorrow and I want to wake up with a clear head. And if anybody had said to me, oh, one won't hurt, you sure? You sure you don't want one? I'd rehearsed so many times saying, no, thanks, I'd rather have none. I'd rehearsed it so many times, and in fact, that wasn't a thing, that didn't occur. They didn't ask me, oh, are you sure, do you want one? Because you find that actually people take you at face value. They actually kind of go along with what you're telling them if you're confident enough with it. And you gain that confidence by the rehearsing, the practice, and the saying it out loud. So I'd done all that rehearsal, I'd done all of that practice, I went along for the meal, and do you know what? The first half hour to an hour was boring. It was dull. I felt awkward, I felt anxious, I had no interest in really what they were talking about because I was no longer part of their social circle and part of that professional circle. So we didn't have much in common, and I was so glad I was out of that context that I didn't really want to enter into all that boring conversation about what was going on and all the bad stuff about what was going on, because that's what I'd escaped from. So I found it dull, I found it awkward, and I felt quite tense, quite uptight and quite inhibited. Because, of course, one of the things that alcohol used to do for me was it used to help me feel confident, relaxed and uninhibited. So the first proportion of the evening, a first section of the evening, was quite awkward for me. However, halfway through the evening, I'd relaxed. And this is the thing. This is what you'll find as you become more confident with living life sober and enjoying your life sober, is that you do go through moments of boredom, awkwardness, social anxiety, panic even. But those are just kind of moments that pass, and you end up finding that you relax and you find your natural confidence somewhere in there. It comes from somewhere, or it did for me. And you find yourself engaging with people on a much more authentic and natural level. And this is what happened at this meal out with my friends. So by the time, or my ex-colleagues, by the time I started driving home in the car, I was actually driving home in the dark. Oh, and hey, that's another advantage to going out and doing these things sober, is you get to drive home. You get to be in control of your own movements, of your own destiny, of your own timetable. So I got to drive home with a clear head, not worrying about whether I was over the limit, how much I was over the limit, and what route I should take home that would be the best route home. None of that. Just got to drive home with a clear head, smiling to myself, because we'd all had a bit of a laugh, had a bit of a joke, and I'd ended up having a really good evening. In fact, during that meal, because I'd chosen to drink a non-alcoholic lager while the others were all having their aperitifs and their wines with the meal, I'd chosen to drink non-alcoholic lager. And what had happened was, instead of going on to have a second alcoholic drink, the others had decided to join me in my non-alcoholic lager. So we ended up with sort of 4 or 5 empty bottles of non-alcoholic lager at the end of the evening. So what you can also find is that you can be a positive influence on other people. So I'm driving home that night and I'm just smiling to myself, thinking, what a lovely evening. That was fantastic. And of course, woke up in the morning, clear-headed, fresh, and ready to seize the day. With the Christmas Day meal at my parents' house, it was a similar thing. This was a really big routine pattern break for me, because every Christmas Day that I can remember prior to that, from the age of about 16 onwards, had involved alcohol and copious amounts of alcohol and getting drunk. So I had to do a lot of planning about the drink I was going to take with me, what I was going to drink instead. I'd done a lot of mental rehearsal again, just imagining the day playing out in my mind's eye, imagining the kind of person I wanted to be sober. I wanted to feel relaxed, I wanted to feel comfortable, and I wanted to feel quite energetic. So what I did was I practiced. I kind of imagined myself behaving in those ways and being those ways before I actually went on that Christmas Day. I imagined my brother and my brother-in-law both asking me why I wasn't drinking and did I not want something to drink, and being a bit surprised by the fact I wasn't drinking. I imagined my mum, who's lovely and in a really polite and British way, might have, she didn't in the end in fact, but she might have kind of insisted on pouring me a glass of wine when I declined, and she might have done that thing of saying, oh, are you sure, love, do you not want to drink? You sure? One won't hurt, you can have one. So I'd mentally rehearsed all of that again, and I had prepared in my mind's eye, and I'd rehearsed out loud all of the things I was going to say in response to those challenges and those pressures, which didn't happen, as it turned out. And again, I had a fabulous Christmas Day. It was different sober than it had been when I was drinking. But again, driving home afterwards, because I became the designated driver, driving home afterwards, I was joyous. I was full of joy at having navigated my way through this Christmas Day without alcohol, with my tonic water, and I think had I taken this was quite a long time ago, incidentally, so it's difficult for me to remember the detail, but I think I'd taken a non-alcoholic bottle of wine with me, and I'd had a couple of glasses of that. It wasn't too great, but I'd had a couple of glasses of that with the meal. So I'd just rehearsed mentally in my imagination all of these things I was going to do at the meal, how I was going to behave, how I was going to be, and that helped me to get through the meal. What I also remember about that Christmas Day, that first Christmas Day sober, was that I drove with my son and my boyfriend afterwards to meet his girlfriend's parents that evening. So I was able, and I never would have been able to do this previous Christmases when I was drinking, I was able to get in the car, drive the three of us to my son's girlfriend's parents' house, and I was able to sit down with them, have a chat, have a mince pie, have another non-alcoholic drink while they were all sort of sat drinking wine, and it was fine. So you can go into these situations feeling anxious because it is going to be different and you are breaking a pattern. But what you find is, as the time goes by, you get through that anxious phase, you end up relaxing and you end up having a great time. You end up enjoying it. And even if you don't have a great time, even if you just have an okay time, afterwards you can go home with that kind of satisfaction and that feeling of smugness and that feeling of achievement, and you wake up in the morning the next day feeling fantastic. Now, the time of the boyfriend's work's Christmas party was hard. That was a tough one because my whole drinking life I had spent dealing with parties by getting pissed. That was what I did. And I would be the one that did the crazy stuff. I would be the one that was, kind of became the life and soul of the party and kind of got involved in whatever antics were going on. I would be somewhere at the centre of it, good or bad. And so going to parties for me It's not kind of my thing. It's not something I'm really interested in. And what I know now is that when I was going to all those parties in the past and I was drinking and getting drunk, is I was just running away from myself. I know that now. So what I did is I had to really prepare. I had to really prepare for this party because it was a place I was going to feel uncomfortable. It was a place where I imagined that just about everybody else was going to be getting drunk and drinking and just getting drunk and silly and, having fun. And I wasn't going to be a part of that. I imagined I was going to feel awkward. I imagined I was going to feel shy. I imagined that I wouldn't have anything in common with anybody there. And so what I did to protect myself in that situation was I thought ahead, discussed it with my boyfriend, and we both agreed that we would stay for 2 hours, that I had a get out clause. We thought of an excuse, can't remember what the excuse was now, but we thought of an excuse and we had our kind of get out of jail free card. We had our getaway excuse ready in the bag, and I'd rehearsed saying it. And I'd got him on board. He was supporting me with this, and he didn't really want to stay for long anyway. So we were in control, and that's an important thing, is to be in control. We were in control of when we left. So it didn't seem to be able to go to this party for just an hour or two and know that we had an escape route made it manageable in my mind. I could manage that. What would have been much more challenging for me to manage would have been the thought of going to the party and having to be there till 2 a.m. That would have been unmanageable. But arriving there about 9 and leaving about 11, that was manageable for me. It was 2 hours that I could get through because I could see the end point. Now, the interesting thing again was, just like with Christmas Day and just like with the meal I went to, is that I ended up, it wasn't great, it wasn't a fantastic evening, I didn't have a great time, but the second hour that I was there, I actually quite enjoyed. It was okay. I ended up having a couple of conversations with people who I did get on with, who made me laugh, ended up having a bit of a joke around and a fool around with one of the women I met there, and ended up meeting a couple who we actually got on really well with, and had a sort of half-hour chat with this couple and got on really well. So it ended up being, let's say, an hour of awkwardness, an hour of anxiety and of feeling shy and of it really being boring and hard work, and an hour of actually quite a pleasant time. And then we got in the car and drove home and just had a laugh about what had gone on. So the conclusion to all of this is that for my first Christmas and New Year sober, actually, let's skip the New Year because this is really just about Christmas. It's a separate story about New Year. My first Christmas sober involved protecting myself by saying no and rehearsing and practicing saying no so that I was more confident when I did say no. And it involved me planning the things I was going to say no to, planning what I was going to drink instead, and preparing by coming up with all the excuses and the reasons, and by mentally rehearsing how it was going to be different and how I was going to cope with any pressures or challenges that came my way. And by only choosing to go to a couple of things, 3 things that I thought I could manage and that I thought I'd have enough control over, that I could escape unscathed and manage them sober. And that is what I did. And that brings me on to the 3 Ps. The little tip that I've got for you here, the gift that I want to give you today, a Christmas gift, if you will, is the 3 Ps. So the first of the Ps is protect yourself. Say no to the things you know are going to be too challenging, too tempting, too difficult. The second P is plan. Plan those things. Plan what you're going to say no to. Plan what you're going to say yes to. And when you've done that, plan how you're going to manage your evening. Plan your escape route. Plan what you're going to drink. Plan how you're going to be. Plan who you're going to tell. Plan what you're going to say when people are saying to you, oh, just one won't hurt. Plan all of that in advance. And the third P is linked to the planning. It's the preparing. When you've planned what you're going to do and what you're going to go to and what you're going to say no to, you prepare for each of those things. You use your imagination to Work out in advance how you're going to behave, what you're going to do, what you're going to say, who you might be challenged by, where you might get some pressure from, and you prepare how you're going to deal with all of that. And you prepare by rehearsing. So the 3 Ps: protect, plan, and prepare. I hope all of this has been useful to you. I hope it's given you some ideas about how you can get through your Christmas sober, if that's what you want to do. For more motivation and inspiration about how to live life happily and healthily sober, you can subscribe to my channel. I'll look forward to catching up with you very soon, and in the meantime, let's go get sober together.